Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Just before we start,
Good evening.
yeah. Good evening. Good evening, everybody.
Fine,
Uh,
fine.
all right. I'm fine. I believe that everybody can hear and see. So I want us to go to our WhatsApp group and post a reminder on the group so that people that are yet to join, they can join the meeting. Okay. Let's do that within the next 4 minutes. Thank you. All right. Like I said, uh, we are going to get started right away. I don't know why some of us are yet to join. You know, night section is holding after the work hours when everybody is relaxed at home. So I actually expected to have a full house today. So please, you guys should help me go to the chat room, post in the chat room that it's time for the meeting so that those that are yet to join, they can join the meeting right away. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We still have a minute left for that before we get started. We still have a minute left for that before we get started. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. So we can get started. Please, if you can see my screen now, type one in the chat room. You can see my screen. Type one in the chat room. Thank you. All right. Without no further ado, we are going to get started right away. We're going to get started so that we can finish on time. Right? Now, today we are going to be diving into policy advocacy and awareness campaign, right? which will be handled by our facilitator, Mr. Idris Mubarak. Now, Mr. Mubarak is going to lead us on an inaugural cohort through the digital advocacy and policy frameworks on neuro inclusion. Now, we're going to be learning from his wealth of experience in social and the behavioral change communication. He's going to guide us in using digital tools to amplify our awareness both in our community at large and also in our workplaces. So without no further ado, I want us to use your favorite emoji. Use your favorite emoji. Let's make welcome to the stage, Mr. Idris Mubarak.
Thank you so much, Pascal. I deeply appreciate the warm introduction and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I find it an honor to be able to speak to everyone here about something that is quite important, especially when it comes to neuro inclusion. Pascal, am I audible? Just so that I know that everyone can hear me clearly.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, you're audible, but then we can't see you.
okay, no problem. Just give me a second. Let me show my face.
Okay. Okay.
Can you see me now?
Yes, yes, we can see you now.
Yeah. Perfect. So, hello everyone. My name is Mubarak Idris, as Pascal has said. I have been doing policy advocacy for about a little over 8 years now, and specifically in the Nigerian context. So, I would say that I have a bit of experience when it comes to talking about this important thing. Why I'm really happy to be here is because I believe that neuro inclusion is actually really important, especially when it comes to educating young people and making sure that we are very careful about how we educate our young ones right from the start, because we live in a society whereby it's easy to just generalize and it's easy to just push some aside because they do not match up in a particular order and level. Glad that the Punuka has decided to highlight this. Please, if you have your mic on, I will kindly ask that you turn it off. Thank you very much.
Rebecca, Rebecca, can you mute yourself, please?
All right then.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Now, policy advocacy and awareness, it actually plays a very huge role when it comes to the different types of education that we have specifically in Nigeria. But I'd want to start with one of the deepest things that made me actually go into policy advocacy fully. I worked from 2018 to 2022 in Kano State, and we were pushing for the Child Protection Bill to be passed into law. And that was the only bill at the time that actually criminalized child marriage. I was working under an organization called Bridge Connect Africa Initiative. So that was when I got to learn about, policies. At first, we just wanted actually child marriage to be ended, but then we did not know how to go about it. We did not understand what it means to actually say that this thing is a crime. And a lot of people who understood legal loopholes in that state, they were using it because if you do not have a policy, then you cannot put people to the law. So that is why it's actually important. So I'd like you to move to the next slide so that we start this lightly, and then, I'll just want to ask the participants some questions. So I'd like to ask, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word advocacy? I'd like to hear, maybe two or three responses. If nothing comes to your mind too, that's fine, but, you can just tell me. Thank you so much, Dr. Tonia. So please, if anyone is willing to talk, you could just raise your hand or you could unmute and speak. Thank you.
Advocacy is standing up for someone.
Okay, thank you very much. You don't need to overthink it. Whatever comes to your mind when you hear the word advocacy, even if it's right now, just say it. Or feel free to use the chat box too.
Hello, Mr. Idris.
Hello, I can hear you.
Yeah, this is Agnes. So whenever I hear the term advocacy, what comes to my mind is speaking on behalf of another who is not in a capacitated position to talk about their issues. I, what I really understand from advocacy is just representation and also speaking on behalf of a person who is not capable or does not have the required abilities to speak on behalf of themselves towards an issue.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Deeply appreciate it. Okay, Dr. Tony has said advocacy is representing someone. So we can see that from what people have shared, advocacy is about supporting, it's about promoting, and it's also about pushing for changes, right? And these could be either public policies, it could be laws, or it could be even what do you call it? It could be regulations to address a certain goal or a certain issue. Now, in simpler terms, I would say that advocacy has to do with influencing decisions that are made by governments or made by institutions. And the reason why you do this is specifically so that they reflect the particular interest and the values or needs of the people that you're representing. So, advocacy is not just about you. That's one thing I want you to understand right from now. Advocacy is about the people that you represent. And when they say you're an advocate, it means you're representing someone. You definitely need to believe in the cause before you represent them, because, like I said, you cannot have a lawyer who is not supporting you and then he's going to represent you in a case. So you have to actually believe in the cause for you to do it. But then again, the collective voice of the people who you're advocating for is what is most important when it comes to advocacy. Now, I would like to say that there are 5 steps when it comes to understanding the policy cycle, specifically even the one in Nigeria. The first step is for you to identify and prioritize the issues that needs to be addressed through that policy. And the reason is because our policymakers, especially in Nigeria, they actually go for tangible, they actually are very interested in things that you can see, feel, and touch, the projects that you can cut ribbon with. So if you're going to talk about any policy advocacy that doesn't have to cut a ribbon, you need to make sure that whatever the specific issue that you're advocating for, you really know about it to a very good level. The next thing you need to understand is how to develop potential solutions and strategies to that particular identified issue. The reason why sorry, please do have the mic on. Okay, thank you, Joseph. So the reason why you need to understand the potential solutions and strategies is because whenever you go to present an issue and you say that there's a particular policy that needs to be changed, in other words, maybe it needs to be amended, it needs to be repealed, you need to make sure that you already have potential strategies or solutions so that you're not just coming into the space and then when they ask you, how do you solve it? You now say, by the grace of God. That's not an answer to give. So after you have set the agenda, the next thing to really understand about advocacy is that you need to develop potential solutions and strategies for everyone. Now, when you do that, it shows that you've done your homework and then you've already seen the particular strategies you want to try. The next thing is for policy adoption, and this is when we now get to understand that adopting a policy is a marathon. It is not a race. It is not something that can be finished, in 1 week or 2 weeks. It takes a lot of time. And this is because policies affect a large number of people, and they'll probably affect a large number of people for a long amount of time. So it's important for you to understand how do you gain approval and how do you formalize these policies through the legislation processes. Then the next thing is the implementation. After it has been passed into law, how do you ensure that these policies are being put into action? And how do you ensure that the necessary resources that you need is there to work? I was once in a session with the deputy governor now, Abdullahi, the deputy governor of the CBN, as at the time he was I think he was the chief of staff to the Kaduna State governor, in person of Abdullahi Datijo. And he mentioned that whenever your policymakers are talking to you about, we are going to do this for you, we are going to do that for you, if you did not see it in the budget, then you people are just having a conversation. So whenever a particular policy has been done, there also needs to be a budget so that it should be implemented. Because if you do not have the funding for that, then chances are it will just be on paper and then it will not be able to be implemented the way you want it to be, because you need to test these policies to see whether they're in place or not. The final thing is for you to assess the effectiveness of the policies and then you adjust it based on results. Evaluation is very important because from the time you start to think about a policy, it may not be necessary that everything that you want to have the way it is, it'll work. So some of the things that you may want in your policies, it may be very idealistic, but then in practicality, it may not be possible. So it's actually important for you to assess it over time. Most times it takes more than 5 to 10 years before an evaluation is being done. And in some cases, some governments actually take 15 to 20 years, or some don't even bother. So after that, thank you for moving the slide. The next thing is for you to identify your key stakeholders. The first key stakeholder is the government officials, because they're actually the ones that are going to pass the policy and they're going to make it into law. So government officials are very important. But I'd like to say that they're very important at every stage of it. So you should not have a top-down hierarchy type of participation with them. Even the secretary to the permanent secretary is actually very important. The gate man that would allow you to enter is very important. So I would say that those are actually key stakeholders when it comes to getting into government spaces. Community leaders are very important because whenever you want a policy to be passed, there needs to be a need from that community to say that this is what we want. And chances are, if you're able to put a lot of quote unquote pressure, then the policymaker would have to listen and would have to actually bring the bill to the floor of either the Senate or the House of Reps. So you have to mount that pressure on community leaders, and then you need to make sure that these people actually understand that what you're advocating for is very possible. In the context of neuro inclusion, I would say that I'm really proud with the work that the participants of this fellowship are doing, because it is something that has always been misconstrued, especially in our culture, as somebody not being complete or the person does not know what they are doing at all. But with the level of educational awareness and policy campaign that would happen as a result of this fellowship, people will start to understand that when you identify someone who is neurodivergent, it is actually an opportunity for you to train them in a way that best fits them rather than the seclusion and calling them unprintable names. So another thing that's important is interest groups. I would say in this case, Punuka Foundation can be labeled as an interest group. So these are civil society organizations, they could be industry association, an example of an industry association here can be Meristem Nigeria, because they actually support this program, and also professional groups who understand that this is an issue where it needs to be backed by a policy. Now, when you have these people, definitely they're made of not more than one people. It shows that it's actually very important. So when it comes to policy advocacy and creating awareness on a particular issue, it is different people and stakeholders that actually make it important. The final one is the public, and this is ordinary citizens who are actually stakeholders. One of the ways for you to realize whether an issue is actually very imminent or is actually very serious is the amount of people that you can gather in place for them to, protest or even do a rally to show that they really, really want this to be passed. I remember when the Not Too Young to Run bill was passed, it was because young people mounted a whole lot of pressure on the government that, we need to reduce the number of age. However, what we are seeing these days in the terms of politics is that we are having some forms for participating in, whether it's senatorial or gubernatorial, being all the way to 100 million or 50 million. Now, the question is how many young people can actually afford that? So you can see that we have a policy in place whereby younger people can actually, vie for these political offices. But the question is it practicable? But when you identify your key stakeholders, that is when you are able to bring about people that will make sure that when we're putting in a policy, it's not something that will now come back and shoot us in the leg. So all these things are very, very important. I'd like to pause here at first to ask if anyone has a question before we continue further to the principles of effective advocacy. Thank you. Okay. Please give me a thumbs up if you've been hearing me, or if nothing is understood, I can start from the beginning again. I really don't mind. Okay, Dr. Tonia, thank you for your response. Okay, Fatima Zahra Oshiu, please go ahead.
Um, th- Thank you for your addition and with this just I'm a little bit confused. When
Sir, am I the only one
the
can hear her
law
properly?
is it, hello, Irene.
Hello, Fatima, can you hear us? Okay, I think her network is a bit scratchy at this point in time. Maybe we'll come back to her later in the session. All right then, let's continue. It seems she wanted to ask a question, but we can continue for now. So, what are the principles of effective advocacy? One of the most important thing is it's very, very important for you to be clear about the change. And this is where I'd like to say that whenever an advocacy is being done, I'd like to say that if it's being done in a place whereby the level of literacy is not so high, it's very, very important to avoid any form of acronyms or abbreviations. And I'd say this because of my experience with advocating against sexual and gender-based violence. So there was a time that we were advocating for the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill to be passed into law in specific states. And it was during the North Normal rally that happened some years ago. And we were actually using the acronym SGBV, which is sexual and gender-based violence. So while we were doing the rally, we saw that some people were looking at us a little differently. And then they had their they had their eyes up. It was like they thought we were doing something very mischievous. So I engaged them in a conversation. I'm like, don't you want sexual and gender-based violence to be a thing of the past? They said yes. And I said, why are you not supporting us? Why are you looking at us as if we are here to come and steal your common mandate? And they said the reason is because SGBV sounds like LGBT, so they don't want to be advocating for something that even sounds, like what they don't want to be concerned with. And I just realized that, you could look at it and say from a literacy standpoint, it's because they don't understand it. But if we were very clear about what we wanted, like we spelt it out in full, perhaps they wouldn't have even had any form of association with the acronym. So it's very important that whenever you want to do your advocacy, you're clear about what you want. When it comes to neuro inclusion, do you want more inclusive classrooms? Then the question is, how do you want to go about that? What is that specific thing that you're advocating for? When you're clear about the change, it's easier for people to want to support you. It's easier for people to want to help you. I remember when the popular Aproko doctor was advocating for people to simply do something. Who can remind us what Aproko doctor was advocating for when he started his, I would say, advocacy journey? What was the one thing that we knew Aproko doctor for?
Drink more water.
Thank you very much, Nasir. That was the whole thing he was saying. And also there are some times where he would tell us to not be opening our fridge at night. You understand, because of late night eating and all that. So you have to be very clear about the change, and it has to be very simple so that people would understand what to do. We know that when it comes to neuro inclusion, there are a couple of things that needs to be done. However, we need to break it down to be very simple. And when we have a particular ask, it should be as clear as daylight. The second thing is that we need to be able to center lived experiences. And I gave an example here that neurodiversity advocacy is actually strongest when we actually center the voices of neurodivergent people and we are not centering what we want based on our ideal situation, right? So we need to make sure that the strongest voices are those who actually need the support most. It's not about gathering everything all at once. I really believe that when we take policy advocacy as a step-by-step process, then it gets easier to celebrate the wins rather than saying that, oh, they didn't give us this. It's always good to focus on the positive and understand that even if it's just one out of the 10 requests that you have that you get is actually better than having none. In fact, sometimes we celebrate even just bringing them to a seat at the table. We all know that whenever it comes to policy, some of our policymakers, they love retreats more than anything, right? So even having a funder come into the space to say that, hey, let us have this conversation. We'll sponsor the retreat for you, no problem. But we also know that there are some issues that are very, very serious that they get past real quick. So your ability to be able to center those lived experiences is what makes it more powerful. The third thing is that you need to make it accessible, use inclusive languages. I really love when I see adverts that are in either Hausa, in Igbo, or in Yoruba. It is very important for us to do that because there's some people that do not speak English, right? And it doesn't make them less intelligent. So we need to make sure that even the parents that have been seeing some signs and symptoms with their children, but they don't understand what is happening, they understand how to give their children the support that they seek. We need to make sure that pidgin is being used as a proper means of communication. And we all see that when it comes to radio jingles, pidgin English actually goes farther than when somebody is speaking proper English. The most important thing when it comes to communication is not how prim and proper your English is. The most important thing is that they did get to the receiver. If it did not get to the receiver, no matter how beautiful your English is, you have not communicated at all. The final thing is building allies. It's actually very important. So it is I like to call it a diamond, whereby if you have everyone in place, then you become stronger. So parents are actually very important because they need to be able to report the progress, of the different learning methods that have been put in by the educators, and also even employers too are actually important, and even the policymakers too. So we need everybody on board for a policy advocacy to work because, as we've said, you are representing people, right? So it's very important for you to do that. Now we will go to the navigating the legislative processes of it because we have to do things right when it comes to policy advocacy, even though I would say that some of the reasons why it is very slow, especially in Nigeria, is because of the level of bureaucracy and the fact that a lot of policymakers do not see it as important. So it takes more time for us to be able to create that sense of urgency for advocacy that is not like an infrastructure, or as I like to say, you are not cutting ribbon for something. So we need to understand it. How are laws made? Laws are made through a series of steps and it includes drafting bills, they have community hearings, you have floor debates, and then there's a final approval. Then there's the lobbying and advocacy part. Lobbying is when you try to get these policymakers to ensure that they do their job. That is simply what it is, but it's the reality of policy advocacy. You need to lobby because there are always competing demands, right? There's a lot of policies, and a lot of them might not have the ample time to actually understand what it is about. But if they see that you are very passionate about it, they will listen to you. So this involves you writing letters to legislators to influence policy decisions, because we need to have someone on the floor that would actually bring it out before the conversation is even started. That's why you hear when they say somebody has sponsored the bill, and then when it comes to the Senate or the House of Reps, we hear that somebody has sponsored 9 bills and somebody has sponsored 4 or 5. Then there's also public consultation, and this is when you provide opportunity for the public to actually provide input on those proposed policies. And the reason why you do this is because you need to build more evidence that this is actually important. And then when you hear the response of the public, when it's so overwhelming, chances are the government will see that it is important for this to be done. And also, it's also important that diverse perspectives should also be respected and considered. So perhaps you want a policy to be implemented across the 36 states of Nigeria. But then again, we realize that there are cultural sensitivities, and then there are some people that might have a pushback towards it. So it's important for you to identify those people, and then you see how you can bring them to the table. Policy advocacy does not go fast when there's a divisive structure being put in place. It's a place whereby everybody needs to be on board, or at least even the ones that are not on board, they do not feel compelled enough to want to stop what you are doing. So that is very important when it comes to policy advocacy. Then talk about now we're going to talk about how laws are actually made in Nigeria. There are 11 ways from the last time I checked. There are 11 steps, rather, or stages, how laws are being made in Nigeria. And you can check Law Paddy, which, in my opinion, is a very good place for you to just learn about some specific laws in Nigeria. So please, you can check Law Paddy. This is not an advertisement. I do not know them, but I think they're doing a great work. The first thing is that how does a bill originate? It could either originate through the executive, the Senate, and then the House bill. I believe we all know the levels of government here, and then we understand what this is talking about. Then the second stage is that there's an initial review of the bill, right? This is when the Rules and Business Committee and the Committee on Rules and Procedure, they actually bring this bill there. And then there's the gazetting of the bill. I remember recently, I think with the Nigeria Tax Act, we were hearing about gazetting of bill and how one of them was changed, so we heard about that. So the gazetting of bill is actually important because this is when you give members and the public notice that there's a bill that is about to be considered. I used to call this the town crying stage, whereby you get people to know that there's actually something that's going to come. The next thing is actually the first reading. This is when the clerk and then the clerk reads the short title of the bill and then he tables it either before the Speaker of the House of Reps or the Senate President of the House of Assembly. You understand? Then the next one is what we call the second reading. The second reading is when the bill is debated for the first time. That is when members of the House of Reps or members of the Senate will come and say, this bill, it looks nice, but these are the things that are not right, or these are the parts where I do not agree with it. If some of us actually followed the Nigerian Tax Act, you could see that there were a lot of debates on the amount of money. There was some parts that were saying that the North was not going to be favored. There was a part that said that this is going to favor a particular state the more. So you could see that this is where people air whatever grievance they have to it or whatever support they actually have for it. So it's important that they're being equipped with the right set of details and people have actually read it. The sixth part is when the committee of the whole standing committee of the whole house. This is when, the standing committee would actually go deeper into it and then they will check the nitty-gritty of that. So for stage 7, we have the committee report. That's when the chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill. Now, you see some parts are actually public facing, while some parts, if you are not reminding your policymakers that how far, what is happening, or you're not paying regular visits, sometimes you just go and find out that it has gone down, down, down. So it's very important that you are always following up to see whether the chairperson of the committee has actually reported progress on the bill. Then the eighth one is the third reading. This is when the bill is actually debated for the final time. In this debate, that's when they will agree. And we all know that in our own, I don't want to call it a parliament, in our House of Assembly, we say those in favor say aye, those not in favor say nay, and then whoever has the loudest voice has it, right? So this is when it's either going to be decided whether it needs to be reviewed further or it's going to be assented. Now, when it's assented, this is when you get the clean copy of the bill. It will be signed by the clerk of the House of Assembly. Stage 10 is when both the Senate and the House of Representatives now pass the bill. And then stage 11 is when the president assents to it. That means the president signs it and passes it into law. So we can see that when it comes to policy advocacy, it's not something that you start today and finish tomorrow. It simply isn't just possible, unless maybe if you have some political motivation to it, because I have seen laws being passed overnight in Nigeria. But then again, when it comes to issues that are, that you need a whole lot of attention towards, it seems to take more time. So, when talking about policy, we understand that not everyone would have the time to go through every single letter of it. And you can't go to a particular policy maker and then give them a 400-page document and tell them to read it about the policy. They will collect it, but they simply will not read it. And that is why you need an effective policy brief. Now, what does it do? I've been speaking about clarity, 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 but being concise too is actually very important. A policy brief should actually be concise and easy to understand. I remember one of the readings that I actually shared that the class should actually read before this is actually a policy brief, which, in my opinion, was very clear and concise. I hope some of you have been able to skim through it and see how they actually use visuals to communicate some of these things and actually see how short it is. It's not too long. It makes it easier to understand. You can always add your further reading under. I used to say it's like references. You can add as much references as you want, but then it needs to be as clear as daylight. Now, another thing is that it needs to be any evidence based. You can't go to a policymaker and say, I believe is a feeling that I have. No. There's a reason why you see that a lot of people try to gather sign ups and telling people that they should vote for something. When you have more people voting for something or just registering their displeasure for something, it shows that there's actually concern there. So there needs to be evidence. You understand? Evidence base is actually very important. And I like to say this, especially as young people, there's a tendency to always take the work that we do or the type of energy that we have as youthful exuberance, or it's because we don't have anything better else to do, right? The passion is being misconstrued as us just having excess energy. So, for the young people here, I think it's important that whatever you want to do has to be evidence based so that you do not get discredited or you do not turn out to be a liar, or people say that this one, whenever they come, they just used to say what's on their mind, or maybe they have a particular agenda behind it, which might be personal. Another thing that's important is it needs to be targeted to the audience, right? So the policy brief that you will create for a policymaker may not be the same that you would create for public consumption. And something being different does not necessarily mean that it won't contain the same message, right? I used to say if you want to teach a child ABC, perhaps you might want to color it properly than when you want to teach someone a little bit older. You understand? When it comes to adult education, they may not want the colors to be overly bright. So it is still the same content of information, but how do you break it down? Because when you're creating awareness campaign is always about knowing the particular audience. When they read it, does it resonate with them? Are you using heavy, heavy English there because you want to show us that you know English more than everyone? A policy brief is not the space where you do that. Yes, there are some technical terms that should not be skipped. We should name things the way they are, but it is very important and very, very imperative for you to make sure that you understand the audience that you are talking to. And then you go in line with that to make it as simple as possible. And there should always be a recommendation to action. Some people call this call to action. Call to action is When they finish reading a policy brief, okay, what they've seen that, okay, this thing is very important to the community. The first question is, what do I do? How do I go about it? People should not start asking their question, should always have an answer to that question at the end of the policy brief. You can always lay out a three-part whereby if you don't have enough time to go for a rally, maybe you can sign up and add your voice to this. You could also add something as simple as share it on your social media. You could also add something as share it on your WhatsApp. Then you could add like, do you want to even donate to this particular cause? If someone in the country is passionate about something to the point whereby they donate, chances are that person is willing to even come out and take a stand on it. So I used to say that you also need to understand your audience to the point whereby whenever you're organizing anything, you're able to determine to a certain level the people that always show up, the people that may not show up, but their voices on social media will be very loud for you, and the people that are able to even talk to the community leaders and the policymakers on your behalf. This is a picture from Yaga, Africa, of when the former late president Muhammadu Buhari, actually signed the Not Too Young to Run bill. As you can see, most of the people there, as at the time, were very young people. These days, they actually look, more matured, I would say, than they were. But it was clear that young people came together to demand for something, and then it was done. Like I said in the beginning, it definitely takes a lot of time. So one of the things that's actually important is to build strong relationship with policymakers, and the only way to build it is through regular communication and engagement. If there's something you want someone to do, perhaps you want to understand the things that they care about and then try to introduce a new issue to them. But you cannot do that with somebody that you insult morning, day, and night. It's simply not possible. If somebody is your friend, chances are they would help you. Or if someone, let me not use the word friend, but if someone is cordial with you, chances are they would listen to you and they would want to support you compared to when you're always attacking them, especially if you get too personal. The other important thing is providing credible information. Credibility is so important when it comes to policy advocacy because you don't want it to be rubbished in any way, shape, or form. And this is when I like to advise people that when it comes to policy advocacy, especially for an issue you care about, you should not be partisan at that particular point in time. You can decide to be partisan after you are finished advocating for it. But imagine that I am part of an opposition party, as we like to call it in Nigeria, and then I say I want something, and then it's not coming as fast as possible. The next thing, I've gone to a particular newspaper to go and speak bad about that person. Chances are the person will not want to listen to me. But if you are non-partisan, and then you show that you just really care about the issue, it's not about politics or personal sentiments, chances are the person will listen to you. Another thing is that you need to demonstrate public support, and this includes the rallies that are being held and how you show that the issue is very important. And that leads me to the next slide on coalition building. Coalition building is quite important because you get to amplify voices. You get to show that people really care about the issue. There used to be a particular place, I think it's opposite Millennium Park, I think it's called the Fountain, where whenever there's a rally or a protest, that is where it begins, right? And then you see people with placards, and you see that a lot of people are really passionate about the issue. I'd like to bring up also the NSAS, the time that we have the Feminist Coalition. They pulled in a lot of funds to make sure that the resources were there so that people were not hungry and so that people would stand on business to make sure that they understand that the police brutality that was happening at the time and is still happening, because I recently saw a case, that we bring that to an end. So it's important to also pull resources because let's be serious, you cannot do proper policy advocacy without some level of funding. Funding is not everything, but to say that it is not important will be saying something that is far from the truth. Another thing is increased influence. An influence to me is different from just having a celebrity, right? And social media numbers can be quite deceiving, and a lot of people feel like once you have like 5 million followers, then that means in real life 5 million people will follow you for a cause. I don't think that is influence. Influence is when you want to organize, let's say, a rally, and you are able to ensure that at least 30,000 people will be there because of who you are. And what we've seen is that the number of followers you have on your social media does not necessarily correlate to the impact that you have. We all know that when we see a particular issue that is going to happen, or when a particular event is going to happen, there are some people that by their main attendance and by their main voices, they are able to bring people who are loyal to the cause or also loyal to those people, and in some way they could actually support you. And this is very important, that in the neuro inclusion circle, you need to ask yourself, who are those people that when I bring them closer, they are able to amplify the work that I'm doing at this point in time? Who are those celebrities that can do it? You understand? I'd like to give an example that when we're talking about issues with the government, there are some musicians that have been very vocal about, the deficiencies in our government compared to others. I wouldn't want to go into listing names, but we all know that when it comes to musicians that are true and true about the fact that, bad governance need to stop, for example, we know the specific people that we can bring to the fore. So you need to make sure that whoever is coming into the course, you don't just select them because they are the hottest at that point in time. To be honest, you'll be disappointed because it may not generate the impact that you want it for. And when you have coalitions, when you have like a large group of people, then it becomes easier to actually make sure that the government listens to you. Then there are different sensitization strategies. I've mentioned awareness campaigns. Another one is community conversations. In the north, we call it majalisa, whereby in the evening, sometimes, especially in areas that have a lot of farmlands, we have the community leaders actually come around, and then they have conversations about the community and what is the way forward. It's important to also partner with organizations. So I'd also like to encourage, as participants, when you finish your fellowship with Punuka Foundation, disturb them for any event that you are happening. Let them help you reshare, repost. If there's somebody you need to talk to, there's this saying that you're seven people away from the president. And these days, I even think it is lesser. So make noise using your social media, tag who needs to be tagged, because you are not asking for money, you're asking for support at that point in time. So partner with organization and use inclusive communication. Don't make it divisive. Like I said, you want more people on your team when it comes to advocacy, and you also want the people who do not really support you to not be against you. They can just be in the middle. It is very important, because when you make it divisive, or you're not using inclusive communication, then it becomes a problem. Another thing is that you do not badmouth the people who are unable to see the importance of inclusion or neuro inclusion too. This is not a sport to call people bad. It is a sport. This is a sport to actually bring about people that will support your cause. Then also, it's important to celebrate neurodiversity. I would implore you that whenever you want to highlight your stories, it should not be from a sad point of view. There's something in the advocacy space we call poverty porn, whereby some people like to depict Africans as poor, and then they'll go and look for a picture of somebody in the village that does not have access to clean water. To be honest, when it comes to storytelling, that does not work again, because that is a stereotype, is the danger of a single story, right? The person that does not have access to clean water doesn't mean that he or she does not smile, or does not have friends, or does not have communication. It's important to celebrate neurodiversity. And there's a particular popular Indian movie, I think it's called Tari Zameen Par, whereby they talked about dyslexia, and how I remember the star actor Amir Khan, who was an educator, was able to get the child, and the child was able to understand how they would learn things better. So I think that's an important movie for those who have not watched it. To please check it out and see if they can learn one or two things when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to empowering citizens for policy advocacy, this is actually quite important. This is a picture of me advocating for the passage of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill in Kano State. We marched to the Kano State House of Assembly, and then we met the clerk, and he assured us that something was going to be done about it. So we did that with about 150 people. I think it was in 2018, if memory serves me correctly. So the reason why it's important is that you need to raise awareness, right? If you have a social media platform, imagine that you're able to get at least 150 people tweeting about something, or just writing a message about why they're passionate about it. I would implore you to not make it generic messaging. It should have a personal feel and touch to it so that it goes as far as possible. You can always use hashtag to track the particular mentions that have been done. Another thing is, when it comes to mobilizing communities, also need to encourage citizens to engage in advocacy activities. The thing is that if you're not reminding people constantly, they will not see it as something that is important. And we live in a society whereby some people do not do things unless there's a financial benefit to it. But if they understand that their ward or someone that is close to them would actually benefit from it, they would actually be willing to do that. I've talked about building partnerships. I think it's really, really important. And also, you need to engage policymakers. With this, I have come to the end of my presentation for policy advocacy and campaign, but I'd like to ask one question. Permit me for that. What is your biggest takeaway from this session? But before we do that, I'd like to know if you have any other question about what I've said, or if you need some clarity about policy advocacy being done in Nigeria, or if you have any question that has to do with anything else when it comes to neuro inclusion. Thank you. Fatima Zahra Shehu, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the insightful presentation, Mr. Mubarak. And my first question is about the meaning of policy. Does policy means the plan for action? If yes, is the plan the meaning of policy is plan for action. Then after making a plan, and this is what we want, this is the action we want to take through advocacy, then does that mean this policy have to become a law before it will be implemented? Or can policy be implemented without being turned into a law? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima Zahra Shehu. I just like to say that a policy is not the same thing as a plan of action, and a policy cannot be implemented, especially in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, unless it has been passed into law. And the reason is because the policymakers that we've saddled with these responsibilities, they need to make sure that whatever policy that we are proposing, they need to make sure that it is palatable to their citizens or it is relevant to them. I used to say that what may work, a policy that may work in the north may not work in the south, and that's just the way Nigeria is made, right? And that is why in policy there's something called domestication. So even if a policy has been passed at the federal level, it needs to be domesticated in each state. And this means and domestication actually has to do with making sure that every single part of that policy is actually palatable. And by palatable, I mean that, it will go well with the citizens there. Now, when you talk about plan for action is not something that should be completely shared with the public, right? When you have a CSO, that's civil society organization, you're not going to share all your steps out there because it's just too much information. But when it comes to plan of action, that would actually include the timeline that you want to do your advocacy, the responsibilities, who is responsible for, talking to this person and that person. And that would actually take a lot of time for you to share all that. So policy is actually a set of rules, it's a set of principles or guidelines that shapes decision and behavior. But when it comes to plan of action, it actually includes the specific steps that you want to take. It includes the timeline that you want to take and the responsibilities and the budget involved. So if you say you want to do policy advocacy right now, and then you want to do it on neuro inclusion, let's even be as specific as saying for dyslexia, right? And then you want more educational materials in certain schools. So you're not going to release your budget or what you plan to do to the public. It's not going to be in your policy because it's not relevant at that point in time. But what is important are what are those steps, what are those guides, behaviors, and principles that are important. The plan of action is actually reserved for the implementing organization. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. But please, is there a difference between policy and law? And
There's
how can we know that policy have been implemented?
Okay, so it's the responsibility when it comes to a law. A law is a law is basically something that has already been passed, by either the House of Assembly or the House of Reps. So when it comes to law, it's a guiding principle that if you do this, this is the repercussion, right? So take for example, we have a law on theft. You can't just go and pick somebody's things. And even if you pick it, there is a law that states you need to be charged, to court, and then they will go and check the law or in the constitution, what is that thing you did? But when it comes to a policy, why a policy is a little bit different is because a policy, as at the time that it is being formed, there's a stage where it does not become a law. A policy, only when it has been passed does it become a law. So that is the difference that I would say exists between the two. I don't know if I've answered your question. All right, then. So I'd like to ask, what's your biggest takeaway from this session? Please, if you'd like to share either via the chat. I know that some of us have had a long day, maybe spending time with our family, given that this is a public holiday. But I want to thank you all so much for listening. For those of you who have stayed till this time, I think it shows the level of care and attention that you put towards it. And please feel free to reach out to me. I believe Pascal has my details on LinkedIn. If you have any question about policy advocacy, or even if you want me to join in on any of the amazing work that you're doing, in the country. Thank you. Over to you, Pascal.
All right, amazing, amazing. Wow. Thank you so much, Idris. Thank you. Thank you for this amazing section. And also thank you for making out your time for the foundation. We don't take it lightly. Thank you so much. So I want everybody, let us go to the chat room and appreciate our facilitator tonight. You can unmute yourself and appreciate him. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Idris. You can type in the chat box. Appreciate him. Appreciate him. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that all of us we are going to make adequate use of what you have taught us tonight and begin to work on some policies. And of course, once anybody wants to get your contact, we're going to, make it available right away. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Without no further ado, remember we actually posted some materials on the Google Classroom. You can always go through it once again, and you can always reach out to us if you are confused about anything. Now, next week is another section. Yes, we're going to be having our live section for next week on Tuesday from 5 p.m. down to maybe 6:30 or 7 p.m. So I'm just mentioning it so that we can all have that in mind as we enjoy our weekend. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure that most of us were exhausted and we would love to rest. So good night, everybody. Thank you so much for your active participation. See you soon next week. Good night.
Thank
So
you.
the meeting is officially over.